Hello YouTube, my name is James Lawrie, aka WikiNative, and today I'm going to talk about verifiability. Verifiability is one of Wikipedia's 3 core content policies, along with no original research and neutral point of view. I like to think of verifiability as putting the necessary steps and mechanisms in place to enable other editors and Wikipedia's readers to fact check your work. And the reason I think this is quite important is it kind of goes to the heart of sort of Wikipedia's reputation as a reliable encyclopedia or a trusted source of knowledge. One of the questions I get asked a lot when I tell people what I do for a living, I'm a professional Wikipedia editor, is they ask me, is Wikipedia reliable? And really, a Wikipedia entry is only as reliable as its sources. So the onus is really on the reader to actually open up the citations in the tabs and check that the information you're reading on Wikipedia is attributed to a reliable source. Wikipedia considers reliable sources to be independent published sources with reputation for fact-checking and accuracy. A reliable source is not unpublished texts or blogs that have been published on your company's website or Medium. It's certainly not your LinkedIn page or your Instagram profile. And I would sort of advise any budding Wikipedia editors or any writers who want to try their hand at encyclopediaing. When you're writing a page, don't sit down and write your prose out and then run around trying to find sources for it. It's not good. It doesn't work like that. When I'm writing a page, I'll usually take the sources that I want to use, maybe 4 or 5 of them, and lift out my general interest points from the sources. That way I find that prevents any kind of original research creeping into the drafting process. So there are 3 types of sources that we use on Wikipedia. There's tertiary sources, which I don't really use that often. I think the only one of those I've used is the Encyclopedia Britannica, just when we want to kind of align the information on Wikipedia with the information on the Britannica. But Wikipedia itself is a tertiary source, so it's we just tend not to sort of cite other encyclopedias or kind of textbooks or anything too often in Wikipedia. Mostly we use secondary sources, which I'll get onto in a bit. But I think the part where a lot of new Wikipedia editors or copywriters, perhaps trying their hand at a bit of encyclopediaing, go wrong is they misuse primary sources. So I'm going to talk about primary sources now before I get on to secondary sources. So a primary source is a source close to the subject, i.e. the subject's own website or LinkedIn, but also could be perhaps local newspapers that might just kind of pump out routine press announcements, or things like, Shropshire Live or Birmingham Live, those kind of news feed or press release aggregator sites. Those are all really primary sources, and it's not like they're there without their use, but they don't really do you much favors when you're trying to prove that a subject is notable in a new page creation, which I talked about a bit in my last upload, I think. There are reliable primary sources. Say reliable, they're reliable for what we use primary sources for. So I use primary sources, or on Wikipedia, we're only really meant to use primary sources to verify axiomatic statements. That being, the sky is blue. That's a pretty axiomatic statement. Britain is cold in December. That's fairly axiomatic. But axiomatic statements are also things like, when was a company founded, what are its key personnel, and I would usually use company registration sites like Companies House, or SEC filings if I'm dealing with an American company. Even though that information on those websites is still user generated, there are, it's perhaps because they are official filings, and I'm not saying you should trust everything you see on Companies House, and I'm not saying people don't post phony filings on Companies House, but because those are legal filings, it's okay to verify things like when was the company founded and stuff, and I'll usually sort of use those maybe in an info box or something like that, but I try not to sort of go overboard with primary sources, because I don't do anything for notability. I try and sort of keep it to a minimum of one or two, because you don't want to lean on primary sources, because that creates quite a listy, sort of stoppy-starty, janky article. And what is also you don't want to do, another big no-no with primary sources that I see sort of, people have come from a more sort of conventional writing background, journalists or copywriters. What they often tend to do is join up sources A, B, and C to produce outcome X or Y. So it's joining together primary sources to synthesize new conclusions, as a journalist would. That's all well and good if you're doing a journalistic article or writing some long form copy or a book, but that would be beyond the remit of an encyclopedist. We mostly just tend to work from secondary sources, and just work from what is already out there from a subject. That way, if say a living subject gets annoyed with something on their Wikipedia page and they decide to take the Wikimedia Foundation to court, Wikimedia Foundation say, well, them over there, they published it first, go sue them. So it sort of protects the Wikimedia Foundation from those kind of repercussions that affect most mainstream press outlets, I suppose. So yeah, I'm going to move on to secondary sources now. So secondary sources are thoughts, reflections, analysis, criticism, biographical or chronological overviews, but they need to be reasonably in depth. One characteristic I would say is common of secondary sources is they will combine primary sources using synthesis, like what I just talked about, and And that's kind of, when you combine primary sources like that, you get a secondary source. Often when I'm looking for a secondary sources, I'll look for little bits of criticism sometimes, more in-depth analysis, and a kind of an overview that sort of really eschews any kind of things that the company has said about itself. Only has maybe one or two kind of direct quotes from the company, and mostly just kind of discusses the subject with a narrator's voice, or a voice that is removed from the subject, distant from the subject. That's how I would define a secondary source. They are rare. Sometimes, subjects might come to me and, I only ask for 10 sources for a preliminary notability assessment. Sometimes subjects might send me like 100 sources, and of those 100 sources, only maybe 2 or 3 of them might be secondary sources. Anybody can sort of put out a press release and get it published somewhere for a sum of money, but to actually have a journalist or a writer take time out of their day to come and write about your business and research your business and the good, the bad, the ugly, it's not something that happens to every business. Not just, most businesses just aren't that interesting and just don't make it that far. But yeah, secondary sources though, we use them obviously to verify notability. That's the biggie, but also to verify value statements like so and so was the first to do this, or blah 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 blah, or things like any statements likely to be challenged, especially when you're writing about living subjects, living people. It's really important. Anything controversial has to be cited to a secondary source, and even then, it's best to err on presumption in favor of privacy. Wikipedia is not a tabloid, so we wouldn't publish things like what the Sun or Daily Mail publish about living subjects. Just wouldn't happen. Moving on. So what have we got here? Finally, I want to sort of talk about the different types of sources. I've talked about, primary sources and secondary sources, but I haven't talked about like digital sources or analog sources yet, because Wikipedia is obviously a digital encyclopedia, but most of the subjects on Wikipedia, a lot of knowledge existed long before the internet, and a lot often when a person or a company is notable, they may very well have existed before the days of the internet. So in those instances, I would work from local newspaper clippings, things like that, newspaper archives, and so I make it easier for somebody to verify my work just by making sure I'm including all the necessary citation information, and if possible a link to newspaper archives, or anything like that. Certainly, page number, place of publication, the author. With books, I like to work from books because they generally glean better encyclopedic content than today's kind of journalism. But not all books are kind of equal. Obviously, if somebody's published a book, like an ebook on Amazon, and it's self-published, that's not going to have had the same editorial rigor or standards of main publishing houses. So what the litmus test that I tend to apply to books is I will look up the book on worldcat.org, which is like a database of all the books that appear in libraries all over the world. And I'll just see how many libraries that book appears in. You know, is it in kind of more than sort of one library? Does it appear in libraries at major universities? And that's usually a good way of seeing if that knowledge is reliable and can be trusted. Finally, with digital sources, when you're dealing with links, obviously you get things like link rot, pages get taken down, you get 501 errors, websites come and go. So in a way, Wikipedians have kind of become the de facto librarians of the internet. We will often, if a source is no longer available, we'll go onto something called the Wayback Machine and find a snapshot, a screenshot of that source from however many years ago, and we'll link to the archived version of the source and not the original link, although we do still include the original link. Is there anything else I haven't covered? No, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's just about wraps it up for verifiability. Just to say that it is one of the more important content policies, because it's to do with quality control. It keeps Wikipedia's quality, you know, decent, and it, I guess, goes some way to assuaging some of people's concerns about Wikipedia's reliability. Because if if you're worried about something that you read on Wikipedia, if you're worried that it's not reliable, it's a good idea to load up the citation on another tab, view it, read it, and if you think it's not reliable, by all means, just go in and change it. You don't need an account, or just leave a note on the talk page saying, hey, I don't think this is quite right. And before you know it, you'll be recruited as a Wikipedia editor. So yeah, Wikipedia is there to be read interactively. It's there to be used as a tool, so don't abuse it. It's an educational resource. Often it provides education for people who might not be able to access knowledge for whatever reason. So yeah, important policy. And I think in the next video, I think I'm going to talk about neutral point of view. I'll try and do that next week, so stay tuned, because it's going to be a good one. All right, everyone, cheers for watching. Take care. Bye.